Moon Knight, the fictional TV series currently airing on Disney Plus and featuring the Marvel character of the same name, dropped its second episode of the series this week, April 6th, and fans were treated to more of Oscar Isaac's character and his mercenary antics. The episode was packed full of Easter eggs, but many fans won't have noticed a lot of them. Today, we're discussing Moon Knight Episode 2 Easter eggs and secret fans totally missed. First up, it's the Marc Spector origin story. The first episode of the season last week brought up a ton more questions than it answered, and Episode 2 started working towards answering some of these questions. Marc Spector, played by Oscar Isaac, owns a storage unit hideout, which Stephen Grant, who's obviously also played by Isaac, finds out about. Grant figures out where Spector is from as he uncovers a passport owned by Spector, which reveals he is actually a native of Chicago, Illinois. We also find out that Mark's birthday is March 9th, 1987, thanks to the passport, and as we know from previous MCU characters, a lot of them actually have specific birth years, which is different from other comic book characters, who usually don't have a fixed age or year or birth attached, which is the reason they seemingly never age. Moon Knight takes place in either late 2023 or 2024, so Mark is around 36 years old. Of course, Isaac is a little older than this, but he can certainly pass for 36, right? The date of birth isn't the only thing we find out about Mark/Steven. We also learn that Spector was part of a team of mercenaries that stormed a dig site in Egypt, which comes directly from the comic books, which you will know if you've read them. If you remember, Spector actually turned on his employers, but was then himself left for dead, before being resurrected by Khonshu. So we will have to wait and see how all this plays out going forward. Next up, we're talking Fist of Vengeance. Stay with us. Of course, in episode 2, we all learn a little bit more about Harrow, as he shows Steven his bizarre little village and reveals a little more about his past as Khonshu's Fist of Vengeance. As we know from the comics, this is also Moon Knight's nickname job title, but it serves as another reference, kind of becoming two Easter eggs in one, which we love. The Fist of Vengeance actually started appearing on Moon Knight comic covers in the mid-1980s, and it hasn't really left ever since. The other reference to Fist of Vengeance is a more recent nod to Jason Aaron and his time on the Avengers. He brought Moon Knight in and dedicated part of the story to the character, when he merges with Ghost Rider's Spirit of Vengeance, which is where the aforementioned Fist of Vengeance comes from. But this little tidbit doesn't automatically mean that Ghost Rider is now a part of the MCU. It's just a different take on a common Moon Knight nickname. Whatever you guys think of it, it's a cool little bit of knowledge to drop on your MCU-loving buddies from time to time. What do you guys make of this one? Give us your thoughts below. Bobby and Billy are up next. Stick around. As we have seen in the early part of the season so far, police officers Bobby Kennedy and Billy Fitzgerald serve as Ammit's lackeys and actually end up arresting Steven and delivering him right into the hands of his enemies. You will remember a couple of characters called Bobby and Billy from the Moon Knight comics, so these characters are obviously a nod to the comic books. In the comics, they're also known to serve Ammit and work in the mental hospital, which is home to our man, Marc Spector. But here in the MCU, it appears they have been upgraded to have bigger, better jobs, where they can serve Ammit and be of even more use. Of course, their careers are basically the same, as they still serve an Egyptian demoness. Next up, it's that super cool suit, the good old suit. This reference actually covers a couple of nods to the comics, but Steven doesn't really understand what is meant when he is told to summon the suit by Khonshu. As he is thrown into battle against a pretty tough-looking Egyptian jackal, Khonshu tells him to summon the suit, but not fully understanding, he just summons a suit. Oh, Steven. The look he procures in the Moon Knight suit referred to as Mr. Knight, and whilst he looks the part, it's not exactly what Khonshu meant when he encouraged him to summon the suit. The other nod to the comics is the weapon that Moon Knight pulls out in the form of a pair of truncheons. If you think back, you will remember that these are actually the weapons that Moon Knight used in the comics, which is pretty cool. What is your favorite reference to the comics you've seen so far? Let us know below. We're talking GRC now. Stay with us. As he's fighting with the aforementioned jackal, dressed as Mr. Knight, Steven narrowly misses being squashed to death by a double-decker London bus, which would be a pretty grim way to go. We must say. But if you look closely on the side of the bus, you will see an advertisement for the GRC, or the Global Reparation Council, as more eagle-eyed fans will know it as. The organization was actually a part of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which focused on helping those who had been wronged by Thanos. Their goal was to help those who had been wiped out of existence and set them up again, giving them a future and helping them find their way back to their families, jobs, and previous lives. Sounds like a great organization, to be fair. We wish they existed in real life. This also gives us an idea of the timeline the show is based in. As we know, the group appears in the Avengers Endgame, so we know Moon Knight takes place sometime after. We're not too sure if it takes place before or after Spider-Man Far From Home, however, as there has been no mention made of Mysterio rampaging through London just yet. Where do you think this one fits? Next up, Ethan Hawke has stopped by to discuss his role as the Moon Knight villain. As we know from the first couple of episodes, Ethan Hawke, who starred in the 2001 classic Training Day, plays the villain of the piece in Arthur Harrow. The softly spoken, charismatic character is different from other MCU villains, and the fact that he brings a certain amount of calm to proceedings, even if he's trying to oversee his single-minded goals. Apparently, Isaac himself was the one who brought Hawke to the attention of the producers of the show and put his name forward as a potential nemesis of Moon Knight. The pair reportedly bumped into each other by chance in a coffee shop in New York, and after Hawke noticed how excited Isaac was about the role, he wanted in. He mentioned the fact that once he was officially on board, he was pretty surprised at how much the directors took on board his act and Isaac's ideas, and that it was actually he who suggested the weekly Sunday brunch get-together for the whole cast and crew, where they could discuss ideas. It was also Hawk who came with Harrow's introduction in the first episode, when he puts on the sandals full of broken glass, which is a pretty grim watch. Hawk said, "I've kind of just followed my gut my whole life. One of the biggest jobs an actor has is once you're in position to have jobs offered to you, you have to figure out which ones to do and which ones not to do." Fair enough. So what else did Hawk have to say? Well, he referenced the fact that you should just go for it if you believe in it, given the example of Philip Seymour Hoffman, who really believed in Sidney Lumet when they worked on Before the Devil Knows You're Dead, when nobody else did. That film was great, by the way, and we're glad they made it. Hawk said that he noticed parallels in Isaac's enthusiasm to that to the late, great Hoffman, saying, "I just felt right about it immediately." When discussing the character of Harrow, he explained that he feels as though the villain should be the exact opposite of the hero, saying, "I always feel like in some way the villain has to be the opposite of the hero. He has to be the hurdle that the hero needs to realize himself and become fully actualized in the hero's journey." When you think about these things on a metaphoric level, the villain's job is to create the hero, right? So if you have a mentally ill hero, what's the opposite of that? Well, one version would be a doctor, right? Somebody trying to alleviate the pain of the world. That's what doctors do. So I kind of saw him as a doctor, and at the same time, I saw him as kind of a spiritual entity. I started visualizing him kind of like a monk. What have you made of Hawk's portrayal of Harrow so far? Let us know below. As always, thanks for stopping by today, and if you feel like doing us a solid, feel free to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Bye, guys!